Mae West spent her life building a perfect image, the blonde bombshell who conquered Hollywood at 38. But in private, she wrote everything down: the secret marriages, the mob connections, and a truth about her family that would have destroyed her career. "I'm afraid of what people will think," she confessed in one entry. These private writings stayed hidden for decades. Today, we finally know why. Mae West was born Mary Jane West on August 17, 1893, in Brooklyn, New York. She wasn't born in a hospital like most people today. Instead, she came into the world at home, with her aunt acting as the midwife. Her parents, John and Matilda, were very different people. John, known as Battlin' Jack, was a tough prize fighter who later worked as a private investigator. Matilda, on the other hand, was once a corset model who dreamed of being an actress. This mix of toughness and glamour shaped Mae into someone bold and full of personality. Mae grew up in a family that stood out. Back then, kids were usually taught to be quiet and obedient, but not Mae. Her mom, Matilda, let her be herself. Instead of scolding Mae for being stubborn, she laughed at it. This allowed Mae's natural talents to shine. Mae had an older sister, Katie, but sadly, she died as a baby. Maybe this loss made her parents even more focused on Mae's success and happiness. The family moved around a lot, living in different Brooklyn neighborhoods like Woodhaven, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint. These places left their mark on Mae, especially her famous Brooklyn accent, which people would later recognize in her performances. Mae's first big moment on stage supposedly happened at Near's Social Hall in Woodhaven. This small event hinted at the big things ahead for her. Even as a little girl, Mae loved performing. By the time she was 3, she was already making people laugh by copying the way others talked and acted. She didn't just imitate them, she knew how to make people pay attention. Her mom noticed this talent and encouraged her. Matilda often took Mae to vaudeville shows, where Mae fell in love with the performers and their acts. She watched everything carefully, learning from the way they moved and spoke. One performer she admired was Bert Williams, an African-American comedian. His clever way of using humor stayed with Mae and influenced her style later. Mae wasn't just entertaining family at home. By the age of 5, she was performing at church events, and by 7, she was entering talent competitions at burlesque theaters. She called herself Baby Mae, and her charm won over the audience. At first, her father didn't like the idea of her performing in public, but when she won a $10 prize at one of these events, he changed his mind and became her biggest supporter. He even helped carry her costumes and cheered her on from the front row. When Mae was just 14, she became a professional performer. In 1907, she joined the Hal Clarendon Stock Company and officially started her career in vaudeville. She still went by Baby Mae and played up her innocence with girly costumes, pink dresses, big ribbons, and hats. But her performances weren't as sweet as they looked. She added clever humor and hints of maturity, showing she knew how to stand out. Mae West was only 18 when she first appeared on Broadway in a show called A la Broadway. It opened on September 22, 1911, but the show only ran for 8 performances before closing. Even though it didn't last long, people noticed Mae. A reviewer from the New York Times said she had a snappy way of singing and dancing. This small role was just the start for Mae, who already had big dreams of becoming a star. Around the same time, she secretly got married to a man named Frank Wallace in Milwaukee. Mae was only 17, but she lied on her marriage certificate because the legal age for marriage in Wisconsin was 18. This marriage stayed a secret for years, only coming to light in 1935. After A la Broadway closed, Mae didn't waste time. She landed another role in a show called Vera Violetta, which opened in November 1911. This show featured Al Jolson, who was becoming a big name at the time. These early roles helped Mae gain experience and confidence. During this time, she also started working on her famous walk, which was inspired by performers like Bert Savoy and Julian Eltinge. They were part of the pansy craze, a time when female impersonators were very popular. Mae's unique style and sassy attitude were already starting to take shape. Years later, Mae took a huge risk by writing and starring in her own play called Sex. It opened on April 26, 1926, at Daly's 63rd Street Theater in New York, Mae used a fake name, Jane Mast, to write the play and even produced it herself. She played the main character, Margie Lamont, who was a prostitute from Montreal trying to improve her life. The title alone caused a scandal, and critics hated it. They called the play cheap and vulgar, but regular people loved it. The show ran for almost a year, with over 325,000 people coming to see it. Even police officers and lawyers came, adding to the buzz around it. The play was bold for its time. It talked about prostitution, police corruption, and bribery, which made people uncomfortable. Mae's character said things that pushed boundaries, and her dance moves shocked the audience. In one scene, a male character leaned over Margie and made a joke filled with double meanings. People either loved it or were outraged. Eventually, the police raided the theater on February 9, 1927. Mae and her cast were arrested, and the play was shut down. Mae went to trial for sex in April 1927. After 5 hours of discussion, the jury found her guilty of corrupting the morals of youth. She was fined $500 and sentenced to 10 days in jail. Instead of just paying the fine, Mae decided to serve the time. She knew the publicity would make her even more famous. As she was taken away, she joked to reporters, "Give my regards to Broadway." In jail, Mae turned the whole experience into a spectacle. She refused to wear the rough prison underwear and insisted on keeping her silk panties. This detail made the newspapers, and people loved hearing about it. She even managed to have dinner with the warden and his wife every night. Mae later said she used her time in jail to talk to other inmates and got ideas for future plays. She only served 8 days, getting 2 days off for good behavior. When she was released, she held a press conference and even read a poem she wrote about her time in jail. She turned what could have been a disaster into a triumph. The whole experience cost Mae a lot of money, about $60,000 in today's terms, but she didn't care. She said, "I expect this will be the making of me." And she was right. The scandal made her even more famous and set her on the path to becoming a Hollywood star. But there was another twist. In 1935, a clerk in Milwaukee found an old marriage certificate from April 11, 1911. On it were 2 names, Frank Wallace, who was 21, and Mae West, who was just 17. This was a huge surprise because Mae West, now 41 and a Hollywood superstar, was known for being single and independent. She was one of the richest people in America, making more money than almost anyone except a newspaper tycoon, William Randolph Hearst. Her whole image was built on being bold, funny, and free. People loved her jokes about marriage, like when she said, "Marriage is a great institution, but I'm not ready for an institution yet." When the news came out, everyone wanted answers. Mae denied it all, saying she'd never even heard of Frank Wallace. She joked that this was like getting a husband as a surprise gift. Mae even claimed she hadn't been to Milwaukee in her life, though records showed otherwise. But Frank Wallace stepped forward. He said they had met while doing a play in Milwaukee, got married, and lived together for a short time. He insisted the marriage was real, but Mae denied everything, saying it wasn't true. Things got messy. Frank Wallace decided to sue Mae, asking for half of her huge fortune. At the same time, reporters found evidence that Mae had once signed a paper saying she was married during her famous Broadway obscenity trial in 1927. Mae kept denying the marriage, but the case went to court, and it became a huge scandal. People were shocked, but instead of ruining Mae's image, it made her even more fascinating. Fans loved how she handled everything with humor and confidence. Finally, in 1937, Mae admitted under oath that the marriage was real. Even then, it took years to end things. Frank asked for $1,000 a month from Mae, but in the end, he dropped his demands. The divorce was finalized in 1943, and Frank got only $1,000 as a one-time payment. By this time, Mae was 50 years old and single again. She didn't let the scandal slow her down. She kept working and even started a relationship with a younger man, Chester Rabinski, who stayed with her until she died in 1980. True to herself, Mae never married again. Meanwhile, Mae West didn't start her Hollywood career like most stars. She was 38 when she joined Paramount Pictures in 1932. That was a bold move, especially because Hollywood usually cared more about young actors. Even during the Great Depression, when money was tight for everyone, Mae signed a deal for $5,000 a week. People were shocked. She had already made a name for herself on Broadway, where she was known for being daring and different. When she appeared in her first film, Night After Night, it wasn't supposed to be a big role, but Mae refused to just follow the script. She rewrote her lines to make them sharp and funny. Everyone on set noticed her confidence. One of her lines, "Goodness had nothing to do with it, dearie," became so famous that people were quoting it everywhere. When the movie came out in October 1932, huge crowds showed up just to see her. Mae wasn't just in Hollywood, she was already changing it. Mae kept rewriting her lines in every movie she made. This wasn't normal back then, especially for women. But Mae didn't care about rules. She was clever too. When censors tried to cut out jokes or lines they thought were too naughty, she added even riskier ones on purpose. This trick worked because it distracted them from smaller, subtler jokes that stayed in the movie. In She Done Him Wrong, 1933, she told Cary Grant, "Why don't you come up sometime and see me?" That line became one of the most quoted in film history. Mae's writing also helped her stand out. She even wrote a song called "A Guy What Takes His Time" for I'm No Angel. It was bold, but somehow it still made it past the censors. She didn't just write jokes. She rewrote entire scripts if she thought it would make the movie better. Sometimes this caused problems. Big names like William Randolph Hearst tried to block her movies, but they couldn't stop her. Audiences loved her, and her films kept making money. Mae didn't just make movies fun. She saved a whole studio. In 1933, Paramount Pictures was in big financial trouble. Then Mae's movie She Done Him Wrong came out. It cost very little to make, but it earned over $2 million, which is like $140 million today. That one movie helped the studio stay open. Her next movie, I'm No Angel, made even more money. By then, theaters couldn't keep up with demand. People were lining up to see her films, even though it was the Great Depression and money was tight. Mae was the reason Paramount made nearly 40% of its profits in 1934. This gave her power. She made deals that most actors couldn't dream of, like getting a percentage of her movie's profits and approving scripts herself. Even when religious groups tried to boycott her, the studio stood by her because she was so successful. Mae West arrived in Hollywood in 1932, right when the rules about what could be shown in movies were getting stricter. These rules, called the Hays Code, aimed to keep films moral and prevent anything too bold or shocking. Mae's first two films, She Done Him Wrong and I'm No Angel, both came out in 1933 and were huge hits, but they upset a lot of people because of how daring they were. Some even called these movies proof that Hollywood was corrupt. Despite all this, Mae didn't try to tone things down. She joked, "I believe in censorship. I made a fortune out of it," turning all the controversy into free publicity for herself. Her problems with censorship weren't just in the US. In 1936, her movie Klondike Annie caused a huge stir because it told the story of a prostitute pretending to be a missionary. Countries like Austria, Hungary, and Australia banned it. In Britain, so much of the movie was cut that over 1,000 feet of film was removed. Still, Klondike Annie did really well in the US, proving that Mae's boldness kept people interested. Mae was a genius at finding ways to outsmart censors. She would write lines she knew were way too shocking, just so the censors would focus on those and ignore her more subtle jokes. For example, in Belle of the 90s, she wrote the line, "It's not the men in your life that counts, it's the life in your men." The censors removed it, but this let her keep other suggestive lines in the movie. She also loved wordplay, using phrases with double meanings that sounded innocent but had a hidden message. In I'm No Angel, she said, "When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better." The censors couldn't find anything wrong with the words, but audiences understood the joke. She didn't just rely on clever lines. Mae also used her voice and body language to get her point across. In My Little Chickadee, she said, "Come up and see me sometime," in a way that made it sound flirty, without saying anything inappropriate. Her tight corsets made her breathe heavily, adding an extra layer of drama to her performances without breaking any rules. She even used camera angles and costumes to make herself look more glamorous and appealing. Mae didn't stop at writing and acting. She even charmed the censors themselves. She invited them to her house, made them feel special, and sometimes convinced them to let certain lines or scenes stay in her movies. Once, she even argued that a risque line was inspired by the Bible, and it worked. Mae had a smart way of writing scripts, too. For each movie, she wrote multiple versions. One tame, one in the middle, and one full of her most daring ideas. For Go West Young Man, she filmed scenes from all 3 versions so she could decide later what to keep. She also included sacrifice lines, which were so shocking that the censors would definitely cut them, allowing her subtler jokes to stay in. For example, in Klondike Annie, she wrote, "I used to be Snow White, but I drifted." The line was cut, but the rest of her cheeky humor made it into the film. One of her biggest battles was with William Randolph Hearst, a powerful newspaper owner. He hated Klondike Annie because he thought it mocked religion and was too sexual. Before the movie even came out, he told his newspapers to stop talking about Mae West altogether. When he finally watched the film, he called it filthy and told his editors to write articles attacking Mae and the movie. One of his newspapers even asked if Congress should do something about the Mae West menace. Mae West was famous for acting bold and carefree, but her real life was different. She liked dating much younger men, especially strong and muscular ones. This started in her 50s and continued into her 80s. Her most famous relationship was with Chester Rubinski, a bodybuilder 30 years younger than her. They met in 1954 when Mae was 61. And Chester was only 21. He worked in her Las Vegas nightclub show. Mae told him to change his name to Paul Novak, and he did. Paul stayed with Mae for 26 years until she died. He lived in her building and did everything for her. He was her bodyguard, chauffeur, and assistant. Mae didn't let him date other women or even leave town without asking her first. Before Paul, Mae dated other young men too. In the 1930s, she was with a boxer named William Gorilla Jones, who was much younger and African American. This was shocking at the time. When her building's manager tried to stop him from visiting because of his race, Mae bought the whole building just so they could keep seeing each other. In the 1940s, Mae dated Wayne Bernhardt, a wrestler and bodybuilder 24 years younger than her. She gave him expensive gifts like a car and a house. She even put him in her play Catherine Was Great in 1944. But their relationship ended when Wayne married someone else, which made Mae very upset. Even as she got older, Mae kept casting young bodybuilders as her love interests in movies. In her final movie, Sextet, 1978, she was 85 and starred alongside 32-year-old Brad Crandall. Mae once joked, "I like a man who's good, but not too good. For the good die young, and I hate a dead one." Mae's life also had rumors about gangsters. One famous story is about Oni Madden, a gangster who controlled New York's illegal alcohol during Prohibition. People said he helped Mae with her controversial 1926 play, Sex. Some believed they were lovers, but Mae always denied it. There were also stories about Guido Darrow, a vaudeville performer and possible bootlegger. Mae and Guido had a dramatic relationship from 1913 to 1916. Some think they secretly married, and that Mae even got pregnant. She later said she had an abortion, but some biographers think she gave the baby up for adoption. Mae also spent time in speakeasies and gambling dens, where she met people like Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. In 1930, she almost got caught in a police raid at a poker game, which only added to her wild reputation. When Mae was arrested in 1927 for her play Sex, there were rumors that Madden used his influence to get her special treatment in jail. Mae later joked about her time there, saying, "I enjoyed the courtesies of the warden, and I left with a clear conscience and a full pardon." In 1959, Mae wrote an autobiography called Goodness Had Nothing to Do with It. The title came from one of her famous movie lines. The book shocked people because Mae wrote openly about her life. She joked about her many relationships, saying, "I've been in more laps than a napkin." She also supported the idea of understanding and accepting homosexuality, which was very rare at the time. Mae wrote, "Live and let live is my philosophy, as long as people keep it private." She also talked about how she stayed independent and in control of her career. Mae said, "I have always felt a gift diamond shines better than one you buy yourself," showing her belief in women being strong and self-reliant. She also didn't like the idea of marriage and joked, "Marriage is a great institution, but I'm not ready for an institution yet." Mae's book also shared how she handled censorship. She wrote about her arrest for her play Sex and said she treated the courtroom like another stage. She admitted she sometimes lied about her age or made up stories about her life because it helped her build her public image. Mae knew how to keep people interested and said, "It's not the men in your life that matters. It's the life in your men." This mix of humor and boldness is what made her unforgettable. Mae West didn't give up when her movie career slowed down in the 1940s. She started performing in nightclubs instead. At 61 years old, she had her first big show in Las Vegas at the Sahara Hotel in 1954. The show became a hit and ran until 1959. People loved it because it was bold and funny. Mae would sing her favorite songs, joke with the audience, and flirt in her cheeky way. Her shows had young, muscular men dressed in skimpy costumes, which made them even more daring for that time. In one performance, Mae, who was in her 60s, was carried on stage by 6 bodybuilders while she sang "A Guy What Takes His Time." This mix of comedy, music, and daring acts shocked some people, but it made her shows unforgettable. Mae loved surprising people. Once, during a show, she invited a group of U.S. Navy sailors to come on stage. She joked with them and even kissed a few, which caused such a stir that military members were briefly banned from attending her shows. Instead of hurting her popularity, this made her even more famous. Her style and confidence inspired many future Las Vegas performers, including Liberace and Elvis Presley. The Sahara Hotel even named a fancy suite after her in 1957, calling it the Mae West Suite. Everyone wanted to stay there because of her fame. When most people would have retired, Mae decided to try something completely new: rock and roll. In 1966, at the age of 73, she released her first rock album called Way Out West. It had her deep, unique voice singing songs like the Beatles' Day Tripper and Bob Dylan's If You Gotta Go, Go Now. One of the most surprising songs was her version of Twist and Shout, where her playful style shocked and entertained listeners. The album even made it onto the Billboard charts, and Mae became the oldest woman to have a solo album chart at that time. She kept going and released another album in 1972 called Great Balls of Fire at the age of 79. The album had her singing rock classics like Light My Fire, and the cover showed her on a bed surrounded by shirtless young men. Some states even banned the album cover because it was too provocative. Mae didn't stop there. In 1975, when she was 82, she recorded a duet with a 29-year-old actor named Timothy Dalton. The song, called Love Will Keep Us Together, had a music video where she flirted with Dalton in her usual daring style. The video wasn't allowed on regular TV because people thought it was too much, but it became popular in New York disco clubs. Mae didn't let her age stop her from being bold and having fun. Mae's last movie was Sextet in 1978. She was 85 years old and played a character named Marlo Manners, a Hollywood star who was marrying her 6th husband. Her new husband was played by Timothy Dalton, who was much younger than her. The movie had a lot of humor and over-the-top moments, with stars like Ringo Starr and Alice Cooper also in the cast. Mae insisted on singing and performing her own scenes, even though she needed some help with remembering her lines. In one scene, she sang the Beatles' Honey Pie while surrounded by men in loincloths. Some people found it funny, While others felt uncomfortable watching an older woman play such a sexy role, even though she wasn't in perfect health, Mae made sure she looked glamorous by using soft camera angles and even a body double for difficult scenes. Mae West was also a big supporter of the LGBTQ+ community, even when it wasn't popular to do so. In 1927, she wrote a play called The Drag, which talked openly about homosexuality and drag culture. The play had gay characters and ended with a huge drag ball. It caused so much controversy that it was shut down and never made it to Broadway. But Mae didn't let that stop her. She often visited gay bars in New York and hired gay actors for her shows, which was unheard of at the time. She even joked that people thought she was a drag queen because of her deep voice and dramatic style. Her response was, "The best way to prove them wrong is to sleep with them." In 1976, when she was 83, Mae went to a gay bar in Los Angeles to judge a contest where men dressed up as her. This event got a lot of attention and helped make drag culture more mainstream. Mae's support for the LGBTQ+ community and her bold style made her an icon for many people. After her death, biographers uncovered many surprising details about her that she had hidden carefully during her lifetime. One shocking discovery came from a book by Jill Watts, where it was revealed that Mae might have had African-American ancestry. Mae denied this her whole life, but research suggested that her grandmother, Christiana Doelger, was of mixed race, with a German father and an African mother. This could explain why Mae was so fascinated by African-American culture. She even broke boundaries by including black performers in her shows, which was unheard of at the time. Her play Sex in 1926 had one of the first mixed-race casts on Broadway, which was incredibly daring back then. Mae also had a mysterious side. After her mother died in 1930, she became very interested in spiritualism and tried to talk to her mother through seances. She would attend these meetings and claimed she could communicate with the dead. This interest in the supernatural even influenced her plays, like The Drag, which talked about spiritualism and other taboo topics like homosexuality. These hidden parts of Mae's life showed that she was more complex than the bold, glamorous character people saw on the screen. Another big secret Mae kept was her true age. When she started her Hollywood career in 1932 with the film Night After Night, she was already 38 years old. But most people thought she was much younger. She used clever tricks to keep up the illusion. In her movies, she hired younger stand-ins for scenes shot from far away, so she looked youthful. Mae was also one of the first stars to try cosmetic treatments, like getting her lips plumped with injections and having facelifts. She always denied doing any of this, joking, "I'm no angel, but I'm still a woman." Mae's personal life also helped her appear young. She dated much younger men, including Paul Novak, who was 30 years younger than her. Paul stayed with her from 1954 until she died in 1980. Even in her final film, Sextet, Mae played a character in her late 20s or early 30s, even though she was actually 84. The filmmakers used tricks like soft focus cameras and heavy makeup to make her look younger. Mae even lied about her age on official documents. For example, on her marriage certificate, she wrote that she was 18 when she was really 17. It wasn't until after she died that her real age was revealed. Mae West worked hard to control how people saw her. She wanted to stay glamorous and young in the eyes of her fans, and she succeeded for decades.